The Boeing 777 cruised at 37,000 feet above the Pacific, its cabin bathed in the amber glow of sunset filtering through oval windows. In row 10, seat C, Commander Zara Ghost Nightingale slept with the practiced stillness of someone who had learned to rest whenever possible. Her weathered leather jacket bore no insignia, no hint of the steel beneath the silence. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of the sleepless months since her medical discharge from the Navy's elite strike fighter squadron. The intercom crackled to life with unusual urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Morrison speaking. We have an unusual situation developing. I'm going to put Admiral Hayes on the line." Passengers stirred uneasily as a different voice filled the cabin, gravelly, commanding, carrying the weight of 4 stars and 40 years of service. "Folks, this is Admiral Robert Hayes, Pacific Fleet Command. I'm going to be direct with you. We have a developing crisis approximately 200 nautical miles northeast of your current position. A civilian research vessel has been seized by hostile forces, and we have credible intelligence that they're holding 12 American scientists hostage." The cabin fell silent except for the steady drone of engines. Outside, the sky had darkened to deep purple, stars beginning to pierce the veil of night. "The situation is this," Admiral Hayes continued, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. "Our nearest carrier strike group is 18 hours out. The hostiles have sophisticated anti-aircraft systems that make helicopter rescue impossible. They've given us 6 hours before they start executing prisoners." A pause, heavy with implication. "We need someone who can fly a single-seat tactical aircraft off a civilian airstrip, penetrate hostile airspace, and coordinate a precision rescue operation." Zara's eyes had opened the moment she heard Admiral Hayes. Now she sat perfectly still, every instinct screaming while her rational mind catalogued the impossibility of what she was hearing. "I know this is unprecedented," the Admiral's voice softened slightly. "But if there's anyone aboard this aircraft with advanced tactical flight experience, specifically carrier-based operations, we need you to identify yourself to the cabin crew immediately. The lives of 12 Americans depend on what happens in the next few minutes." The silence stretched like a held breath. 300 passengers, each processing their own version of disbelief. In the dim cabin light, a flight attendant moved slowly down the aisle, her practiced smile replaced by barely controlled tension. Her eyes swept over business travelers, families, college students, ordinary people thrust into an extraordinary moment. Zara's fingers found the small silver wings pin in her jacket pocket, the metal worn smooth by years of nervous handling. She'd promised herself she was done. Done with the cockpit, done with the weight of other people's lives in her hands, done with being the person others turned to when everything went wrong. The pin felt warm against her palm, a ghost of who she used to be. The flight attendant's footsteps grew closer, her whispered conversations with passengers creating a susurrus of mounting anxiety. Row 8, row 9, each no, bringing them closer to the terrible conclusion that help might not exist aboard this aluminum tube hurtling through the darkness. Admiral Hayes spoke again, his voice carrying across the cabin like a prayer cast into the void. "Time is not our friend here, folks. If you're out there, we need to know now." The research vessel Meridian had been conducting deep-sea mineral surveys 200 miles northeast of Midway Atoll when the attack came without warning. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the expedition leader, had been reviewing sonar data when the first explosions shattered the pre-dawn calm. The attackers emerged from the darkness like phantoms, 3 high-speed patrol boats flying no flags, their crews masked and heavily armed. The seizure had been swift and professional. The 12-person research team was corralled into the main laboratory, their satellite communications severed, emergency beacons destroyed. The attackers spoke little, their leader communicating only through a handheld radio in a language the scientists couldn't identify. But their intentions became clear when demands were transmitted on international emergency frequencies. $10 million in cryptocurrency, or the researchers would be executed one by one, beginning at dawn. What the attackers didn't know was that Dr. Vasquez's husband worked for naval intelligence. What they couldn't have anticipated was that their seized vessel sat directly beneath a constellation of military satellites, each one recording, analyzing, and transmitting data to Pacific Fleet Command. Admiral Hayes had been pulled from a dinner with Japanese defense officials when the crisis broke. In the war room aboard the USS Ronald Reagan, holographic displays showed the tactical picture in brutal clarity. The Meridian sat dead in the water, surrounded by the 3 patrol boats in a defensive formation. Thermal imaging revealed armed sentries positioned around the research vessel's deck, while the hostages remained clustered in the central laboratory. "Sir, we've got SA-6 surface-to-air missile systems on all 3 boats," reported Commander Sarah Chen, the carrier's air wing commander. "They're not playing games. Any conventional approach is going to result in significant casualties." The Admiral studied the tactical display, his weathered face reflecting decades of impossible decisions. "What about a SEAL insertion?" "Negative, sir. They're too far from any submarine assets, and the sea state won't support covert approach. Those patrol boats have active sonar. They detect any underwater approach at least 2 miles out." The operations center hummed with quiet efficiency, but beneath the professional calm lay a growing sense of urgency. Every minute that passed brought the hostages closer to dawn and the promised executions. "There's one more problem, sir," Chen added quietly. "We're tracking a weather front moving in from the northwest. In 4 hours, that area's going to be socked in with 0 visibility and 40-foot seas. If we don't act before the storm hits, we'll be looking at a much more complex rescue scenario." Admiral Hayes nodded grimly. The tactical situation was deteriorating by the minute, and conventional solutions were evaporating like morning dew. That's when someone mentioned the commercial flight, United 847, en route from Tokyo to San Francisco, currently crossing the search area. It was a desperate gambit, born from the kind of creative thinking that emerges when all standard options are exhausted. But as the Admiral considered the possibilities, a plan began to take shape, audacious, unprecedented, and entirely dependent on finding someone extraordinary among ordinary passengers. The flight attendant reached row 10, her eyes meeting Zara's in the dim cabin light. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The attendant saw something in Zara's face, a stillness that went deeper than sleep, a recognition of responsibility that couldn't be hidden. "Ma'am," the flight attendant whispered, "do you have military flight experience?" Zara's hand tightened around the silver wings in her pocket. 3 years ago, she would have already been unbuckling her seatbelt. 3 years ago, before the accident, before the medical review board, before the dreams that still woke her in the middle of the night. She'd promised herself she was done with all of it. But promises made in quiet hospital rooms carried less weight than the Admiral's voice echoing through the cabin, less weight than the knowledge that 12 innocent people were counting down their final hours. "Yes," she said quietly, "I do." The words seemed to hang in the air like a flare shot into darkness, small, bright, and impossibly significant. The flight attendant's relief was palpable as she reached for the intercom handset. "Admiral Hayes, this is United Flight 847. We have someone." The response was immediate, "Put her on." Zara accepted the handset with steady fingers, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "This is Commander Zara Nightingale, call sign Ghost, former FA-18 Super Hornet pilot, Carrier Air Wing 5. A pause on the other end then. "Commander Nightingale, I need to know your qualifications. What's your experience with single-seat tactical operations?" 4 deployments, 300 carrier landings, 57 combat missions over Iraq and Syria. Weapons Systems Officer Qualified, TOPGUN Graduate Class of 2019. She paused, then added the part that mattered most. Medically discharged 18 months ago following aircraft malfunction and emergency landing. No flight time since discharge. Another pause, longer this time. Commander, I'm going to be straight with you. What I'm about to propose violates about 17 different regulations and probably constitutes the most irregular military operation in modern history. Are you willing to hear me out? Zara looked around the cabin, aware that 300 pairs of eyes were watching her, listening to every word. Normal people living normal lives, suddenly witness to something that belonged in movies rather than reality. I'm listening, Admiral. There's a small airfield on Midway Atoll, approximately 40 miles from the hostage location. We're diverting this aircraft there immediately. Waiting on the ground is a single F-16C Fighting Falcon, fueled and armed for a precision strike mission. The plan is simple in concept, complex in execution. You'll take off from Midway, eliminate the hostile surface-to-air threats, and provide air cover while a SEAL team conducts water insertion from a submarine that's currently racing to intercept. The cabin had gone completely silent. Even the engines seemed to whisper as Zara processed what she was hearing. Admiral, with respect, I haven't flown in 18 months. I've been medically cleared for commercial flight only. And you're asking me to fly a single-seat fighter into contested airspace to engage multiple surface-to-air missile systems. Commander, I wouldn't ask if there were any other option. The truth is, you're not just our best choice, you're our only choice. Zara closed her eyes, and for a moment she was back in the cockpit of her Super Hornet, pulling 7GS in a climbing turn, her vision graying at the edges as she lined up on a target that existed only as coordinates on a targeting screen. The memory was so vivid she could smell the oxygen flowing through her mask, feel the stick trembling in her grip as she fought to maintain control. Then she was back in the hospital bed, watching the flight surgeon shake his head as he reviewed her medical charts. Inner ear damage from the ejection, they'd said. Spatial disorientation. Grounded permanently. 3 years of rehabilitation to get back to civilian pilot status, and even then, only under specific conditions. Commander, Admiral Hayes's voice brought her back to the present. I know what I'm asking. I know what you've been through. Your accident report is in my briefing folder, but right now, you're the only person within 500 miles who has the skills to fly that F-16 and the experience to make this mission work. Around her, the cabin remained frozen in surreal silence. A businessman in seat 9A was recording with his phone. A young mother in 11C held her daughter close, whispering reassurances. Normal people thrust into the periphery of someone else's war. What's the tactical picture? Zara asked, and she could hear the shift in her own voice, the subtle change from civilian passenger to military professional. 3 hostile patrol boats in defensive formation around the research vessel. Each boat carries SA-6 surface-to-air missiles, effective range approximately 15 miles, unknown number of small arms and possible shoulder-fired anti-aircraft systems. 12 hostages confirmed alive as of 30 minutes ago. Weather deteriorating rapidly. You'll have maybe a 2-hour window before the storm front moves in. After that, the area becomes unflyable. Zara's mind automatically began processing the tactical problem, calculating approach angles, threat envelopes, weapon engagement zones. It was like flexing muscles that had been dormant for months, painful but undeniably familiar. Admiral, even if I agree to this, I need to be clear about something. My last flight ended with me ejecting from a damaged aircraft after losing spatial orientation in cloud cover. The medical board grounded me because they couldn't guarantee it wouldn't happen again. Understood, Commander. The decision is yours, but I need an answer in the next 60 seconds. We're already adjusting your flight's course toward Midway, but if you say no, I need to explore other options. Other options. They both knew there weren't any. United Flight 847 banked gently to the left as Captain Morrison began the turn toward Midway Atoll. The passengers could feel the course change, the subtle shift in the aircraft's attitude that signaled their quiet evening flight had become something else entirely. Zara looked down at the silver wings pin in her palm, tarnished but still recognizable, still carrying the weight of promises made to herself and others. She'd earned these wings through months of training that pushed her to the edge of human capability. She'd worn them through combat missions where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. But she'd also worn them the night she'd ejected from her damaged Super Hornet, tumbling through darkness while her aircraft disintegrated around her. She'd worn them during the long months of medical evaluation, when doctors poked and prodded and ultimately declared her unfit for military aviation. "Commander," Admiral Hayes's voice carried a note of gentle urgency, "I need your decision." The flight attendant watched Zara's face, seeing something shift in her expression, a straightening of shoulders, a focusing of eyes that suggested internal barriers falling away. "Admiral Hayes, this is Commander Ghost Nightingale," she said, and this time her voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to life-and-death communications. "I accept the mission. Send me the tactical brief and aircraft specifications. And Admiral," she paused, looking around the cabin one more time, "you better have that submarine in position because I'm only going to get one pass at this." "Copy that, Ghost. Welcome back to the fight." The intercom clicked off, leaving the cabin in stunned silence. Then slowly, someone began to clap. Others joined in until the entire aircraft resonated with applause, not the polite acknowledgement given to landing pilots, but something deeper and more profound. Recognition, perhaps, or gratitude, or simply awe at witnessing someone step forward when everything was at stake. Zara barely heard it. Her mind was already in the cockpit, running through pre-flight procedures she hadn't thought about in 18 months, calculating fuel loads and weapon configurations for a mission that existed somewhere between desperation and impossibility. Outside the windows, the Pacific stretched endlessly under starlight, holding its secrets in the darkness below. Midway Atoll emerged from the darkness like a small jewel cast upon black velvet, its twin runways outlined in blue taxi lights that cut precise geometric patterns against the coral sand. As United 847 descended through the night sky, passengers pressed against windows to catch glimpses of the remote outpost that would serve as the staging ground for an operation none of them fully comprehended. The Boeing 777 touched down with barely a bump, Captain Morrison's decades of experience evident in the smooth landing, despite the crosswinds buffeting the small island. As the aircraft rolled to a stop, ground crews materialized from hangar buildings, their movements quick and purposeful in the harsh glare of floodlights. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Morrison's voice carried a mixture of professional calm and barely suppressed amazement, "we've arrived at Midway Atoll. For obvious reasons, this is not a normal passenger stop. Please remain in your seats while we coordinate with military personnel." Through the terminal windows, Zara could see the F-16C Fighting Falcon sitting on the tarmac like a coiled spring, sleek, deadly, and impossibly beautiful under the harsh sodium lights. Ground crews swarmed around it, conducting final preparations for a mission that had been planned in minutes rather than months. A Navy lieutenant commander boarded the aircraft, his eyes scanning the seats until they found Zara. "Commander Nightingale, Lieutenant Commander Torres, Midway Operations. If you'll come with me, ma'am, we need to get you suited up immediately." The passengers watched in fascination and growing respect as Zara rose from her seat. Gone was the exhausted woman who had boarded in Tokyo. In her place stood someone transformed, shoulders squared, movements precise, eyes already focused on tasks that lay ahead. "Good luck," whispered the businessman in 9A, and suddenly everyone was echoing the sentiment. "Bring them home. Stay safe. We'll be praying for you." Zara paused at the aircraft door, looking back at the faces watching her, ordinary people whose ordinary evening had become witness to something extraordinary. She nodded once, a gesture that somehow encompassed gratitude and determination, and a promise she hoped she could keep. The Pacific air hit her like a physical force as she stepped onto the tarmac, warm, humid, carrying the scent of aviation fuel and salt spray. Lieutenant Commander Torres led her toward a prefabricated building where technicians waited with flight gear that had been hastily assembled from base stores. "Ma'am, I know this is irregular, but we've pulled together everything you'll need. Flight suit, helmet, survival gear, all fitted to your specifications based on your service record." Torres handed her a tablet displaying tactical information. "Here's the current situation update." Zara studied the screen as she walked, her mind automatically processing the intelligence data. 3 patrol boats, designated Tango 1 through 3, maintained a triangular formation around the research vessel. Thermal imaging showed armed sentries on all vessels, with the hostages still clustered in the Meridian's main laboratory. "Time to sunrise?" she asked. 4 hours, 37 minutes. The storm front hits in approximately 90 minutes. And the submarine. USS Michigan is currently 12 miles out and closing. SEAL Team 6 is geared up and ready for water insertion on your signal. They entered the building where a small team of technicians waited with military efficiency. The flight suit fit perfectly, the familiar weight of survival gear settling across her shoulders like an old friend returning. The helmet was more problematic, updated with systems she hadn't trained on, but the basics remained familiar. "Ma'am, we've uploaded the tactical package to the aircraft's computer," reported a young airman. "Target coordinates, friendly positions, communication frequencies. The F-16 is armed with 4 AIM-120 AMRAAMs for air-to-air defense and 2 AGM-88 HARMs for suppressing the surface-to-air missile sites." "HARM missiles," Zara looked up from adjusting her harness. "Those are designed for fixed radar installations, not naval targets." "Yes, ma'am. It's not ideal, but it's what we have available. The missiles will home in on the radar emissions from the SA-6 systems. Should be effective against the patrol boat's fire control radars." Zara nodded, running through the weapon employment procedures in her mind. HARM missiles were designed to follow radar signals back to their source, devastating fixed installations but potentially unpredictable against mobile naval targets. Still, they were better than trying to engage the patrol boats with guns alone. "Ma'am," Torres handed her a secure radio. "Admiral Hayes wants to speak with you before you go." She accepted the handset. "Admiral, this is Ghost, ready for final briefing." "Ghost, the tactical picture hasn't changed, but I want to emphasize something important. This is not a glory mission. Your primary objective is to eliminate the surface-to-air threat so the SEALs can approach safely. Once you've neutralized those SA-6 systems, you provide overwatch and coordinate the rescue. Do not, and I repeat, do not, attempt to engage the patrol boats directly with guns. We need those hostages alive." "Understood, Admiral. What's my backup if the weather moves in faster than predicted?" "There isn't one, Commander. You have one window, one opportunity. If the storm hits before the rescue is complete, we're looking at a much more complicated scenario with a lot less favorable odds." The weight of that statement settled over her like a familiar burden. One chance. Everything riding on execution that had to be flawless despite months away from the cockpit, despite medical concerns that had grounded her, despite flying an aircraft she'd never flown in combat conditions. "Copy that, Admiral. Ghost is ready to launch." "Good hunting, Commander. Bring our people home." The hangar doors opened with a mechanical grinding that seemed to echo across the Pacific. The F-16 sat bathed in floodlight brilliance, its canopy gleaming like an insect's eye. Ground crews made final adjustments to weapons pylons, while fuel trucks completed their deadly cargo transfer. Zara walked toward the aircraft with measured steps, each footfall bringing her closer to a moment she'd thought would never come again. The fighter seemed smaller than she remembered, more compact and predatory than the Navy Super Hornets she was accustomed to flying. But the basics remained the same: thrust and lift, avionics and weapons, the eternal dance between pilot and machine that defined modern air combat. "Ma'am, aircraft is ready for your inspection," called the crew chief, a grizzled master sergeant whose practiced eye had already detected and corrected a dozen minor issues that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophe. She conducted the walk-around inspection with methodical thoroughness, checking control surfaces, weapon attachments, tire condition, intake screens. Everything appeared perfect, but perfection meant nothing if she couldn't execute when it mattered. The ladder felt solid under her boots as she climbed into the cockpit. The ejection seat embraced her like a familiar chair, straps and connections falling into place with muscle memory that transcended conscious thought. Around her, the instrument panel glowed with soft light, familiar systems arranged in subtly different configurations, requiring mental adjustments that came slowly after 18 months away from military aviation. "Ghost, this is Midway Tower, radio check over." "Midway Tower, Ghost, loud and clear." "Copy, Ghost. You are cleared to start engines at your discretion. Current winds are 070 at 12 knots, gusting to 18. Altimeter setting 2992. Zara's hands moved across the controls with growing confidence as the F-16 systems came online. Engine start was smooth, the Pratt & Whitney turbofan spinning up with the characteristic whine that had powered American fighters for decades. Navigation systems aligned. Weapons systems showed green, fuel quantity confirmed. "Midway Tower, Ghost ready for takeoff." "Ghost, you are cleared for takeoff, runway 06. Godspeed, Commander." The F-16 accelerated down the runway with breathtaking authority, afterburner flames painting blue-white streaks against the darkness, as Zara rotated and climbed into the night sky. Below, the lights of Midway Atoll fell away until they resembled just another constellation in the vast Pacific darkness. At 15,000 feet, she leveled off and trimmed the aircraft for cruise flight. The cockpit felt natural again, familiar despite the months away. Her hands found controls without conscious thought. Her eyes scanned instruments with the automatic rhythm of someone born to fly. "Ghost, this is Overwatch," a new voice crackled through her headset. "We have you on radar, bearing 045 for target area. Range to target approximately 38 miles. Copy, Overwatch. Ghost is Winchester with 4 AMRAAM and 2 HARM. Request tactical update." Ghost, thermal imaging shows all 3 patrol boats maintaining defensive positions around the research vessel. No air activity detected. Be advised, weather front is moving faster than predicted. You may have less time than originally calculated. Through her heads-up display, Zara could see the target area as a cluster of radar contacts ahead in the darkness. Somewhere among those electronic signatures were 12 innocent people counting down what might be their final hours. She adjusted her heading slightly, bringing the F-16 onto an intercept course that would allow her to engage the patrol boats from their most vulnerable angle. The SA-6 systems were deadly, but they were designed to engage high-flying aircraft, not fighters approaching at low altitude from their radar shadow. "Overwatch, Ghost is beginning tactical approach. Time to target engagement, 8 minutes. Copy, Ghost. Michigan reports ready for SEAL insertion on your signal." 8 minutes. In 8 minutes, she would either succeed in the most unconventional rescue mission in modern military history, or she would fail spectacularly, taking the hostages' hopes down with her. The F-16 descended toward the wave tops, its radar altimeter painting a digital picture of the ocean surface rushing past below. At this altitude, the fighter was nearly invisible to surface radar systems, a ghost approaching through the darkness to settle accounts with those who had chosen to threaten innocent lives. Above, stars watched with ancient indifference. Below, the Pacific held its secrets and its dead with equal silence. And somewhere ahead, in a cluster of vessels barely visible against the vast ocean, 12 people waited for salvation that might never come. The research vessel Meridian appeared first as a distant glow on the horizon, her deck lights creating a small island of illumination against the endless dark of the Pacific. As Zara's F-16 closed the distance, individual contacts began to resolve on her radar display. 3 patrol boats arranged in a perfect defensive triangle around their prize. Ghost, this is Overwatch. Target area in sight. Recommend approach from the southwest. That'll put you in the radar shadow of Tango 2 and 3. Copy Overwatch. Ghost is commencing attack run. At 200 feet above the waves, the F-16 knifed through the night air with predatory grace. Zara's hands were steady on the controls, muscle memory overriding months of civilian life, as she became once again what she had always been, a weapons system operator, precise and deadly. The SA-6 radar signatures bloomed on her threat warning display like malevolent flowers, their search patterns sweeping the sky in overlapping cones of electronic death. The patrol boats' crews were professionals. Their defensive positioning was textbook perfect, their radar coverage comprehensive. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had never faced Ghost. Ghost, you have radar lock from Tango 1. SA-6 system is tracking. Copy. Zara's voice remained steady as alarms began chiming in her cockpit. The patrol boat had detected her approach and was attempting to achieve missile launch parameters. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they opened fire. She selected her first harm missile, the weapons seeker head already detecting and analyzing the radar emissions from Tango 1. The targeting computer painted firing solutions across her heads-up display, while threat warning indicators bathed the cockpit in amber light. Ghost has firing solution on Tango 1, Fox 3. The harm missile dropped from its pylon and ignited, accelerating toward its target at 3 times the speed of sound. Its radar seeker locked onto the SA-6 system's emissions and followed them like a bloodhound following a scent. Inexorable, unstoppable, final. The explosion lit up the night sky as the missile found its target, the patrol boat's fire control radar disappearing from Zara's threat display in a burst of static. On the ocean surface below, Tango 1 was suddenly dark, its SA-6 system reduced to twisted metal and scattered electronics. Splash 1 SA-6 system, she reported, already maneuvering for the next engagement. Ghost is engaging Tango 2. But the remaining patrol boats were not passive targets. As she lined up on Tango 2, shoulder-fired missiles began streaking up from all 3 vessels, smaller, shorter-ranged weapons that couldn't reach high-altitude aircraft but were deadly against low-flying fighters. Ghost multiple SAM launches, brake left. Zara threw the F-16 into a crushing turn, pulling 6 GS as she dove even lower toward the wave tops. Behind her, infrared-guided missiles exploded harmlessly in empty air, their seekers confused by flares and the ocean's thermal background. Ghost is defensive, she reported through gritted teeth, fighting against the G-forces that tried to force blood from her brain, maneuvering for second engagement. The tactical picture was evolving rapidly. Tango 1 was crippled but still dangerous, its crew firing small arms and shoulder-launched weapons at anything that moved. Tango 2 and 3 maintained their positions around the Meridian, their SA-6 systems fully active and searching for her return. She climbed to 1,000 feet, gaining altitude for her next attack while staying below the engagement envelope of the remaining surface-to-air missiles. The F-16 responded to her control inputs with mechanical precision, its flight control computers automatically compensating for wind gusts and turbulence. Overwatch Ghost. Request updated positions on Tango 2 and 3. Ghost, Tango 2 is bearing 085 from your position, range 12 miles. Tango 3 is bearing 120, range 15 miles. Both vessels have active SA-6 systems. Copy, Ghost is engaging Tango 2. She rolled inverted and pulled toward the ocean, using the research vessel as a reference point to line up her next shot. The HARM missile's targeting computer acquired the radar signature from Tango 2's fire control system, painting targeting data across her heads-up display. But something was wrong. Her vision seemed to blur slightly as she pulled out of the dive, the horizon line wavering in a way that had nothing to do with atmospheric conditions. Inner ear damage from her ejection 18 months ago, the medical condition that had grounded her. "Not now," she whispered to herself, forcing her eyes to focus on the instrument panel. The artificial horizon showed level flight, but her inner ear was telling her something different. Spatial disorientation, the killer that claimed more pilots than enemy action. "Ghost, you're drifting off course. Check your heading." Overwatch was right. Without realizing it, she had allowed the F-16 to drift into a gentle turn, her compromised inner ear failing to detect the change in aircraft attitude. She corrected back to the proper heading, but the incident sent ice through her veins. If the spatial disorientation got worse, she could become completely unable to distinguish between up and down, level flight and steep turns. In combat, at low altitude, such confusion was a death sentence. Ghost has firing solution on Tango 2, Fox 3. The second HARM missile streaked away into the darkness, its infrared signature visible for just a moment before it disappeared into the night. 20 seconds later, another explosion painted the horizon orange as Tango 2's radar system died in fire and twisted metal. "Splash second SA-6 system," she reported, but her voice carried less confidence than before. "Ghost is maneuvering for final engagement." One patrol boat remained, Tango 3, its SA-6 system still active and dangerous. But as she turned toward the final target, vertigo hit her like a physical blow. The cockpit seemed to spin around her, instruments blurring together in a nauseating kaleidoscope of lights and numbers. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to trust the instruments rather than her lying inner ear. When she opened them again, the artificial horizon showed she was in a steep climbing turn, exactly the opposite of what her body was telling her. "Ghost, are you all right? Your flight path is erratic." Negative, Overwatch. Ghost is experiencing some technical difficulties. Stand by. Technical difficulties. The military euphemism for a pilot in trouble facing problems that might prove insurmountable. She had two choices: abort the mission and let the hostages die, or push through the disorientation and hope her training was stronger than her medical condition. Below, on the research vessel Meridian, Dr. Elena Vasquez watched through a porthole as explosions lit up the distant horizon. She didn't know what was happening, but something had changed in the past few minutes. Their captors were talking rapidly among themselves, their earlier calm replaced by obvious agitation. "Do you think?" whispered Dr. James Chen, the expedition's marine biologist. "I don't know," Elena replied quietly, "but something's happening out there." The lead captor, a man they had come to think of as commander, spoke sharply into his radio while gesturing toward the distant flashes of light. Whatever he was hearing was not good news. Through the porthole, Elena could see the patrol boats moving, their formations shifting in response to some unseen threat. For the first time since their capture, she allowed herself to hope. In the F-16's cockpit, Zara fought a battle on two fronts, against the remaining patrol boat and against her own failing vestibular system. The spatial disorientation came in waves, each episode lasting longer and growing more severe. She selected her final harm missile and tried to lock onto Tango 3's radar signature, but the targeting computer showed multiple solutions as her aircraft wandered off course. She was losing the ability to fly straight and level, the most basic skill required for weapons employment. Overwatch Ghost, I need you to talk me onto target. My navigation systems are unreliable. Copy Ghost, turn left heading 140. Target is 12 miles at your 2 o'clock position. She followed the verbal guidance, trying to ignore what her inner ear was telling her about the aircraft's attitude. The F-16 responded to her control inputs, but she could feel her flying becoming more erratic with each passing minute. Ghost, you're lined up on target. Range 10 miles and closing. Copy, Ghost has. Stand by. Another wave of vertigo hit her, worse than the others. The cockpit seemed to tumble around her while the instrument panel became an incomprehensible blur of lights and numbers. When it passed, she found herself in a steep diving turn toward the ocean, the radar altimeter screaming warnings as the wave tops rushed up to meet her. She pulled back hard on the stick, feeling the G-forces slam her into her ejection seat as she fought to avoid controlled flight into terrain. Ghost, check altitude, you're too low. She leveled off at 50 feet above the waves, her heart hammering against her ribs. That had been close, too close. Another episode like that, and she would join the countless pilots who had lost their final battle against spatial disorientation. But the hostages were still there, still counting on her to succeed. She could abort the mission, return to Midway, and let someone else try to find a solution. Or she could finish what she had started, regardless of the cost. Overwatch, Ghost is re-engaging final target. Guide me in. Ghost, turn right heading 160. Target bearing 090, range 8 miles. She followed the instructions mechanically, no longer trusting her own senses. The F-16 became an extension of Overwatch's eyes and her own determination, guided by voices from afar toward a target she could barely see. Ghost, you have firing solution. Target is locked and tracking. Copy, Ghost has tone on Tango 3, Fox 3. The final harm missile depart.